This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam. I'm your host.
Happy New Year, Sam.
Happy New Year to you too, Richard. You made it. We've made it.
2022.
2022, another year down, another year past.
Yep.
Just flying by.
Yep. Whether you're ready or not, here it
Any moment
comes.
now, we're going to be having our second child. So that's fear and trembling is upon us.
I think that the Bible calls those the latter days.
Yes, labor pains, as it will. But anyways, I hope all of our listeners had a great holiday season and rung in the new year with
hopefully not wrung out.
It's too soon for that. Hopefully you've still got your New Year's resolutions. You've kept them. You haven't broken them yet. The first week of 2022, but so
there's still time.
Yeah, the week's not over yet. So, but we like to do this because Richard is a Type A person and a goal-oriented individual. So you'll just have to bear with us through this. And I imagine if you're in leadership, you have some goals of your own. And so we thought, what better time to think about goals, to think about living on purpose than at the beginning of a brand new year that hasn't been ruined yet. Or hopefully not yet. And so today, that's what we want to do. We want to look at just the power of setting goals, the power of living on purpose. And that's what's going to be the topic of discussion today. And so with that, Richard, I'll turn it over to you and maybe just explain to our audience, for those who don't already know, what is the purpose of goals? Why set goals? Do they matter? And all of that good stuff.
Yeah, well, we are at the beginning of a new year, and I'll tell you what, I used to be a little bit more ambivalent about goals. I
find that hard to believe, Richard.
Well,
ever have been in your life ambivalent towards goals.
Well, actually I have. It's true though, because my attitude is if I always work hard, I always do my best, and so my attitude was kind of like, well, every day I'm going to get up and work hard all day. And so if I do that, I'm going to accomplish a lot, So
fair.
Does it make a difference? Do I work any harder if I don't have a goal? If I, maybe if I work hard all year, I would just naturally overshoot the goal I would have set anyway. So maybe goals aren't, maybe they're not as big of a deal. But
I suspect the hardness of your work is not really in question. It's just what is it that you're working hard at? Yeah,
and I think that's kind of the point I want to make today is focus, living a focused life. It's not that you're not working hard. It's not that you don't do your best at whatever you take on, but does it make a difference if there's an actual goal or not? And so the idea of living a purposeful life, and we might talk about this in a later podcast, but I know there's some people that have mission statements about their own life, and they have long-term life goals. Their goal is to eventually retire and buy a yacht and to live on it, off the coast of whatever.
Or people's goal is to colonize Mars.
Yeah.
We all have our callings.
But there are people that would say, well, I'm going to retire by age 55 and I want to live in this golf community and I want to do this and that. They'll have very specific goals that their whole life is aiming toward, and that might be good. I've just never really done. When people tell me, where do you see yourself 10, 20 years from now, that's always been hard for me because God kind of catches me by surprise, and I've changed careers at least twice in significant ways. I thought I would be a pastor of a church all my life. I was there doing that, experiencing success, happy as a lark. And then twice since then, God has dramatically changed that. So I've in one sense, I've felt like, well, let's just trust God. I'll just do the best I can. And if God wants to change things up, he's welcome to do that. And I think there is some merit to that. I've managed to accomplish a lot for someone that never had a life goal.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think thinking a little bit more specifically down to, let's say, a year, should you have goals in the year that lies straight ahead of you.
Yeah.
And I want us to focus on that to say, as you enter 2022, is there a way to be very focused in what you do? And to begin with, maybe quoting one of the sage philosophers that has so influenced thinking in the Western world over the years, and of course I'm referring to Yogi Berra. He said, if you don't know where you are going, you'll end up somewhere else. And you have to kind of think on that for a bit.
He's not wrong. I'll say that.
He's also the one who said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And so, I've known people like this that were just completely laid back, laissez-faire, just, hey, whatever will be, I'll get up this morning and we'll just kind of see what I need to do. And no real sense of drive or urgency or intentionality, just kind of, and there's something to be said for that kind of mentality. They tend to not suffer as much from heart disease and stress-related illnesses. They can cause some stress-related illnesses to those who depend on them, but
sure, yeah.
they're those kind of people that are pretty laid back and just they're not in a rush. They're not stressed. It's, hey, if it doesn't get done, we'll be fine. It's of course, as a traveler, I see this all the time with people boarding airplanes, and people will be, at the very end of boarding, and someone will, and they'll make these. I hear this. I've heard this comment 1,000 times. They'll say, hey, well, they're not leaving without us, so kind of like, no reason to be stressed. The plane's not going to leave until I get in my seat anyway, so I'm not in a hurry. And I always want to kind of mutter under my breath, yeah, but you won't enjoy having your carry-on in your lap all the way there, because the overhead space has long since been taken. So, there is something to be said about being a little more.
They probably forgot their luggage, so it really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
So, but the interesting thing, and I've thought a lot about this, because I know as a pastor and as a minister and as a leader, I've had people most of my life telling me that I need to, chill out, not be so focused and not so driven. And I realize that there's probably some truth to that. But what's interesting to me is some of the friends I've had that have been the very unstressed, undriven people, I look at their life and they're happy enough. They aren't stressed, but I just don't see them accomplishing a lot. I'll tell you what, almost I'd have to rack my brain here to be thorough and accurate. But when I think of my unstressed ministry friends, they tend to be the ones that pastor the small churches, the ministries aren't doing much. They have to. They're not thriving. They're what they're leading is not growing. They're not adding on. They're just laissez-faire, easy going, but not a lot's happening. And the problem is that, like, I can think of one friend of mine, great guy, but because he's so laid back, his church has never grown much, and so he has no staff. Which means he has to do all the work himself. Doesn't have, people to help him with the worship. So he's got to take care of that as well as preach. And, doesn't have a lot of leaders that have been attracted to his ministry. So he has got to take care of everything, right down to mowing the lawn. And so you'd say, well, you're maybe kind of laid back, but you end up having to do a lot more work when you're laid back. There's a lot more pressure left on your shoulders because you weren't driven enough to attract other leaders and develop them and so on.
Surely there's a balance.
Yeah, I'd say so. In one sense, being really laid back does not necessarily mean you don't have more. It might mean you have more work to do, because if you'd been more driven, you would have had a cadre of other leaders working around you, taking a lot of the load and taking the ministry further. So, so anyway, as you look at 2022, are there some areas in your life that if you were to be more intentional, you would do more? And so one certainly would just be in the area of your walk with God. Don't just assume, and I tell you what, I see so many Christians who are this way. It's just like, hey, I've been a Christian for 30 years. I'll just kind of do what I've done. I'll try to read my Bible in the morning as much as I can, and I might get a devotional to look into, or whatever. I might read a Christian book sometime this year.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, if you looked at your life, you would say, but what area of your Christian life do you really want to grow in this year? What area of your Christian life would you like to be stronger at the end of the year than it was at the beginning of the year? And if so, what is your plan to do that? And I used to kind of be a little resistant to plans, because I thought somehow that might be taking away from God, and it's like, I've got this great plan to have a great walk with God, and yet maybe you hadn't even talked to God about it. But God is not opposed to planning. In fact, there's some great verses in the Bible that encourage planning. The key is let God be a part of your planning process.
Right.
And so what I would say is, if you can, sometime in the early in the year, or ideally before you start the year, take half a day and look at all the major areas of your life and say, God, help me to know, identify for me, search my heart, search my prayer life, search my quiet time, search my, just my daily abiding in you time, and just tell me if there's some specific things that you would put your finger on and say, this could be better. And then, God, tell me what I could do to make it better. So, it could be that God tells you, okay, well, this year, I want you to set your alarm 20 minutes earlier than you normally have. Maybe you always got up at 6:30 to get ready for work, and maybe this year I want you to set it for 6. And with those 30 minutes, don't just sit there staring, into the abyss for 30 minutes because you're so tired. Jump in the shower, get yourself moving, have a strong cup of coffee, and then sit down and use those 30 minutes. And I want you to get the Blackaby's Experiencing God Day by Day devotional, and I want you every day to start with that. I want you then to read a chapter of the Old Testament, chapter of the New Testament. I want you to have your journal ready to write down what God says, and I want you to just pack that extra 30 minutes in with serious time with me. And you do that for a year, and God might say, and your walk with me is going to be in a different place. Or maybe God would say, I want you to intentionally take even just 5 minutes each time you pray, 5 minutes of silence, because I'll tell you what, if you're sitting quietly for 5 minutes, listening to God, that 5 minutes can seem like it takes a long time. But take 5 minutes and just say, I just want to listen. Even 5 minutes each morning before I get in the day, to say, God, you know what I'm going to face today. You know the pressures, the temptations, the crises, the problems I'm going to have to deal with. I don't yet. And so I'm going to just take 5 minutes and just remain silent before you, and let you place on my heart and mind any thoughts, any scriptures, any person, anything I need to do today that maybe slipped my mind. And whatever I sense you doing, I've got my journal right here, my pen in my hand. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to follow through.
Which, for those listening, 5 minutes may not seem like that much, but if you can sit still for 5 minutes and be quiet,
a lot can be done.
Set a timer too, because 5 minutes when you're still is a lot longer than
and if
when you're on the
in
go.
those 5 minutes you're listening to what God is saying to you, God can cover a lot of ground in 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And of course, that doesn't mean you couldn't take 30 minutes to do the same thing, but it may be that if you have never done that just start with something that's reasonable, that's attainable. And then of course, just what you read, we'll talk about reading a little bit more in a minute, but be intentional about reading in the areas of your Christian life, in maybe some books that are going to stretch you, not just the same stuff. You just read everything this author does, but and I've pulled out a couple of the classics, even like Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno, that I'm trying to, just take some time to read through some of the classics that have been around a long time. There might be other books that kind of speak more specifically into my Christian life, but there is something about classics, whether it's in literature or on Christian writing, that it just seems to exalt you in some ways and elevate your thinking. And so at least take on one serious book a year that you've always thought about reading, and so you would say, okay, here's part of my goal this year is to read that. Well, then also a second area would be in your own professional growth. If you're a pastor, if you're a business leader, a professional of some kind, how are you going to improve your skills? And again, I'm really surprised. Certainly in some profession, like pastors, for instance, we love to go. I know a lot of pastors who love to go to, say, like an evangelism conference, and they hear some great preaching on evangelism, and they love the preaching. It's great. They get some rock star preachers in that
Some new
shake the house.
expository technique to apply.
But a lot of times that's not even what they're getting. They're just enjoying a preaching fest, and they walk away, and they haven't learned a solitary thing. They've enjoyed hearing some of their favorite preachers preach, but they walk away, and you're going to keep ministering the exact same way you were before. Mm-hmm. You just enjoyed. I just love it when that guy preaches. And sometimes I'd want to say, well, so what are you going to do differently as a pastor now that you've heard that guy preach? Well, I don't know. I just like it every year hearing him preach. He's so funny, or he's a great storyteller, but how are you going to professionally be better because of that? And so I would say, what are you doing? And like if you're a pastor, for instance, I don't know that many pastors that work very seriously on their preaching. Typically, I'll talk to pastors and they'll say, well, Richard, I've been preaching for 30 years now. And you realize, well, yeah, but you're preaching pretty well the same way you were 30 years ago. You've got the same tools, same commentaries, same style, same approach, same formula. You just sort of fill in the this week's scriptures, but you don't really venture forth to try something new, maybe over the holidays or something else. There are some classes you can take where you can study with great preaching professors and be in seminars where people evaluate your preaching, give you feedback. But most pastors aren't going to be that serious about it. But maybe you're a leader and you've struggled with delegation, and you realize, you know what, instead of just another year going by where I just continued to shrug my shoulders and say, I've just never been good at that. Maybe you need to take a class, get a leadership coach, and say, this year I'm just going to really focus on delegation, and I'm going to in this next year I'm going to recruit this many leaders in my church or my business, but I'm going to give away a bunch of the work I'm doing that I should have given away a long time ago. But this year, at the end of the year, I'm going to raise up some folks that I can train, equip, and hand off some of my work to, and I'm going to get a coach to help me do it. But maybe it's team building. Maybe you realize the staff you have is a little bit fragmented, and they just need some encouragement. They need some focus. They need a mission to drive them. Or maybe you're not that good at confrontation, and there's some stuff going on in your staff or in your church that really needs to be addressed, but you've been putting it off. You just don't like the explosiveness that could happen, the feedback, and so you're just delaying, and you realize, you know what, it's hurting my organization for me to let stuff go. And so again, you could read some books, you could get a leadership coach, you could take a class, you could talk with some peers about that, but what might you do so that this year you finally improve in that important area of your life? So there's we'll look at some more areas here specifically, maybe right after the break.
Sounds good.
Of all the books that my father Henry and I have had the privilege of writing together, next to the study course Experiencing God, I don't think that there's anything we've written that has received more positive feedback than this little daily devotional, Experiencing God Day by Day. People from all over the world have told us that God used these simple devotions to speak very powerfully into their life. And now we're very excited because beginning this coming January, we're going to be launching a new podcast called the Experiencing God Day by Day podcast. And each morning I'll be launching that day's devotional, which I'll be reading for you, so that no matter where you are, if you've subscribed, you'll be able to just hear the day's devotional. So we're looking forward to just how God's going to use that to speak into people's lives. And you can get this anywhere you get your podcasts beginning January 1st.
So, Richard, what are some other areas that we can focus in with our living on purpose, living purposefully, and maybe even setting the all-important goal and not just hoping that we're better off at the end of this year than we were when we started?
Yeah, a third one, and Sam, you and I have talked about this before, but just your health. Do you have specific health goals? I can't tell you how many people, and myself, I've done this as well, have just said, well, I just need to lose some weight this year, or I need to get more exercise. But of course, that's not a goal. That's just saying, acknowledging the obvious. But if you're ever going to lose weight, you have to have a goal. And there's specific things you can do. For one is, do you have a number of pounds you want to lose?
Yeah.
I tell you what, when I'm at my best, I've got a weigh scale in my bathroom that I step on every morning. And before I am tempted to eat that donut in the lunchroom, I've already stepped on the scale, and I realize if I eat that one donut, today's a write-off. I won't lose a pound. So do I really want that? And so set a goal, and then and I tell you, I've had a few setbacks here the last couple of weeks, and I've realized this is very very real to me right now. Just what adjustments do I need to make so I lose this many pounds? And you and I, you joined our running club this year. You're a little, here or there, but
I took a detour and did some cycling.
You did some cycling, but that has kind of helped us. We're in a club with my wife, my son Daniel, and your wife, and you, and there's a goal set of this year. It was whatever the year is. So this past year it was 2021. 2021. Yeah, I got too many ones in there. 2021.
Yeah. So 2,021 miles in a year between
the team. And so I'll tell you that the fact that you set a goal like that. There are days like last week. I had the opportunity to be, on vacation, but I ran every day because we're trying to meet a goal. And so, just having a goal, like there were days I did not feel like it. It was cold out. It would have been really easy to say, I've run the last 2 days. I don't need to run today. But the moment you have a goal, you suddenly, and there's accountability.
It lights a bit of a fire.
And the other people on your team, like my wife is saying, Richard, have you contributed anything in the last couple of days to the running club? And that immediately holds me a little bit more accountable.
Yeah.
Something you've done, and I've tried to do as well of late, is just fasting through breakfast. And that seems to help. It's kind of counterintuitive. We've always been told breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but basically after dinner the night before, I tried as much as possible not to eat till lunch, and then after dinner, of course, don't snack later in the evening.
Yeah, that's the tricky bit. If you stay up late, and it's like,
because it's hard to watch hockey in the evening without popcorn in your hands. But
does popcorn even count?
Yeah. So just to say, what specific health goals, specific tonnage that you want to lose this year? Do you want to run? This year was a milestone for me. I actually ended up running my first half marathon, my first 10K, and some of those kind of milestones. If you set a goal, then now you can measure your progress. If you just simply say, I need to run more, there's no way to measure that. There's no way to motivate you specifically. And so I would certainly encourage you, and again, there's lots of New Year's resolutions that don't last very long. Part of that is you want to be specific about your goal. You want to find a way to hold yourself accountable.
And it needs to be achievable.
Yeah, achievable for sure. And also don't make it something that there's sort of interim checkups. Like if it's all based on December 31st, and so December 31st you look and wow, I was going to run 2,021 miles.
You're going to treat it like a final in
you
college.
can't.
You're just gonna,
with health.
It's
you
due
can't,
tomorrow.
You can't do an all-nighter with your health. So, have something that you're like literally for me. If I'm weighing in every solitary morning, that accountability really helps me. And so don't say, okay, well, on December 31st, I'm going to weigh in, because then you'd be, oh my Lord, I thought I was losing weight here. I've actually put on 20 more pounds.
Yeah.
Daily accountability, at least weekly accountability, certainly is an important part of that. A couple others to say, just some different things like, for instance, your giving. I know some people that every year set goals of how much they want to give away. I've got a good friend that wanted to give to I think 50 different ministries, and they were trying to figure out how can I support a bunch of different Christian ministries, and or I know people that say, well, I started out giving 10% tithe to the church, the Lord's work, and every year they add 0.5% to their giving. I eventually want to be giving 20% away or 50% away of what I have and keeping the other 50. Those are some pretty significant goals. If there's some ministries that you really believe in, and you say, I would love to be able to just give them a sizable gift. How am I going to do that? Well, I've got a plan on that. I've got to maybe not spend on some other things this year. Another area of your life might be in travel. You and I both believe in travel. And I'm always meeting people that will say, oh, I've always wanted to travel. I have that a lot. I take Lyft to the airport all the time, and people will say, I've never even been on an airplane, or I've never been outside the state. I've always wanted to go here or there. And I'll kind of give my little speech on, it's great to do that, but you have to have a plan. 20 years from now, you may still be telling your passengers, I've always wanted to travel, but never made a plan. And so I know you and Carrie are big on that. COVID and everything has put a bit of a curtailment on that. But you guys are always looking at places. I kind of look at some countries I'd like to go to. Like I've never been to Rome, and I've several times had people talk like they wanted to have me come speak there, and then it just never worked out yet. I did get to Greece a couple years ago, which I'd wanted to do, but I'd love to go to Rome, love to see the Colosseum and stuff.
Yeah.
You and Carrie have already done. I've only really been to Brazil in South America, but it looks like I'll be headed to Argentina this year for the first time, which I'm excited about. I love. There's certain countries and places I would love just to see, and also just because I'm speaking, ministering in those countries. I like the idea of having ministered in some way to various countries, and helping people there. So, but that if you're planning it, there are deals that come along. I know you guys have apps that alert you if there's a cheap flight to Paris or something that's coming up or whatever, and it can actually be quite affordable if you do some research. But again, you've got to be intentional, or it doesn't happen. Yeah. I'm always inspired by Praying Hyde, that he was intentional about soul winning, about just leading people to Christ. And he famously one year just prayed that God would give him one convert every day, not just someone he witnessed to, but someone that he led to Christ. And he ended up leading over 366 people to Christ that year. So he asked for 2 people a year, and I got up at least to 4 a year, 4 a day for a whole year. But again, he was very intentional, and because he had that goal, he was always looking for someone else to talk to about Christ. And I think that's there's certainly some great things that we know we should do. That the moment that you have a specific goal, it just focuses your life more. And I'm finding, especially as I get older, that focus can be a hard thing, because there's just so many things I like to do, and there's so many things I am doing, that you're constantly pulled this way and that. And when that happens, you don't stay focused. So if I were there's lots more I could talk about your prayer life, just taking care of your property. You might each year have some goals. I know you do, about clearing some more
trees
timber out of your yard or whatever. I would just say this year, if you're going to have a goal, write it down, pray about them, let God help you to know what the goal should be. Then develop a plan. If you don't have a plan to achieve your goal, it's not going to happen. And then review that, hold yourself accountable, and put it on the calendar. If it's a goal that you want to achieve, put a scheduled time for it. Where you can make an effort and focus.
Yeah, I forget who says it, but it's something to the effect of, goals are just dreams unless they have like a plan or unless there's a deadline or something to that effect. Of like, you can want to do something, but unless there's a plan in place, a deadline by which you need to do it, then it'll only ever be a dream.
Yeah, and don't be one of those people that you get to the end of your life and saying, I always wished I could do that.
Yeah.
Make a plan now so that you don't have a lot of unfinished business when you get to the end of your life.
Well, the possibilities are endless for this new year, and we hope and pray that all of our listeners are able to set those goals, live on purpose for this new year of 2022.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.